We're super excited to have you here. Thank you for taking the time. Today we'll have a webinar in a panel-style discussion about the secrets of the collaboration between vendors. So the idea is really that you already see it on the little screen of the camera. We have different vendors here together today who will be speaking really in a sort of a timeline when you go through a trial. So from the RFP and vendor selection all the way through the life cycle of a trial on what happens, what does a vendor do, where can they bring value to you, and where do they bring even more value if vendors collaborate together. So we have 3 speakers today that are really going to try and share as much insights, experience, or challenges they have faced throughout their years in the industry to help you enhance your clinical supply chain. Now, before we get started, we have the video platform today. How to use it. Usually it's pretty straightforward with a quick recap. So you have a little zoom out, zoom in button where you can put the presentation on full screen. If you were to have any sound problems, there is the cogwheel which will help you through, or you can use the chat function to talk to our technical coordinator who will help you out. Throughout the presentation, the discussion, if you have any questions, whether it's for a specific speaker, whether it's on a specific topic, or related to the industry and challenges you've faced that you would like to share, please use our chat function. We're really interested to hear from you and get your feedback. Now, without any further ado, I would like to present you our speakers today. And our speakers are in the same room today. We're located here in Belgium. It's really an honor to have 3 speakers together in one room in the same for this discussion. We have Stéphane Petit, he's Senior Director of Business Development at Clinigen CSM. And then in the middle, so I'm jumping a person here, is Henk Dieteren. He's a Clinical Supply Solutions Consultant at Suvoda. And then last but not least, we have Anne-Marie Jandin. He's a Strategic Expert, Clinical Supply Chain at Insight. Welcome, gentlemen. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. Maybe before we get started, for the people online that don't know you yet or your company, let's do a very quick recap of what you do at your company, who you are, and a little bit of the expertise you will be bringing today. Anne-Marie, why don't we start with you?
Absolutely, and thanks so much for the introduction, Naomi. So, as you introduced, I am Anne-Marie. I've been working with Insight for about 9 years now, focusing mainly on clinical supply chain optimization for very complex clinical trials. And for those who don't know Insight, let me just give a quick insight into what we do. So, we are a clinical supply chain expert company. We offer optimization solutions, simulation solutions, forecasting and planning systems as well. For that, you definitely might have heard about us at conferences or from colleagues and discussions in the industry. But we also have a very strong team of experts in clinical supply chain that provide professional services to improve clinical supply performance. So that's how we've been able in the past decades, because we're almost, 25 years old, I think, this year. We've been able to reduce drug waste by about 50% in the industry, ensure all patients get their drugs, and we've worked on thousands of clinical trials.
Amazing, thank you so much. Henk?
Yep, thank you for the introduction. Yeah, I'm working for Suvoda. It's now since 4 years. And I'm already working in the clinical trial arena since 1992. Started as a CRA, the normal career, study manager, and then co-heading CTS department. I already worked with the Suvoda team since they started the company back in 2012, 2013. But I also worked with Insight already when I was still at the customer side. So I have a lot of experience with both of you. My role in Suvoda is, as you said, clinical solutions consultant, helping our teams to understand the processes from customers. They are challenging, sometimes really challenging, so I help to translate the language from customer to IoT language and the other way around. And I talk with a lot of customers in demo and protocol reviews, so that's my role. Suvoda as such is already founded in 2012. They started 2013. The first clients came in. We have a lot of trials and we have really great products. eConsent, IRT, eCOA, and ePatient. People might know us already a long time since we have IRT started with Suvoda. And then since a few years we have eCOA and eConsent, and recently we introduced ePatient. So mainly focusing on decentralized trials, but also on regular trials that products will be helpful. We have a lot of experience, as I said, more than 1,500 trials. Most trials are in oncology, 40% of the trials are in oncology, 70% of the trials are globally, and we do all phases of trials, so phase 1 up to phase 4. We have our dedication is be always on time, so we have 100% of our trials delivered in time. And what is, I think, really leading to repetition of business from existing clients is the UAT of 0.7 defects in UATs. That's really a very low number, and that's because we spend a lot of time in user requirements, specifications, try to understand what the needs for the customer are, and translate those needs into IoT or other products. So that's leading to the low number of defects. That's Suvoda.
Thank you. That's a lot of experience also. Stefan.
Thank you, Yoni. Thank you very much. So hello everyone. I'm Stefan Petit. I'm Senior Director of Business Development at Clinigen CSM. This is 17 years. I am in the clinical trial industry, working for a CRO, for a eCOA, for biobanking, biorepository, and now 12 years at Clinigen CSM. So we do, of course, clinical trial supply. So our main activity are linked to packaging, labeling of IMP, warehousing, distribution, QP release, sourcing of commercial medicine for clinical trial use. The main characteristic of Clinigen is that Clinigen, well, it's a big company with 3 divisions. We are, of course, in the clinical trial division. And CSM is the association of 3 small and medium-sized companies that has been created just in 26, well, associated in 2016. And the main characteristic is that we are only focused on clinical trials, so we don't do packaging and labeling for commercial purpose. So we don't need, huge infrastructure, so it allows us to have a lighter structure, to be very flexible. So we are quite agile by structure. That's one of the main characteristics of Clinigen, because so far on the market, the bigger actors are as well focused on commercial packaging labeling. So yeah, so that's the way we want to be focused and positioned on the market.
All right. Super interesting. I'm very excited for the discussion that will follow, because we have very different, let's say, sectors of the clinical supply chain with a lot of different expertise. As I mentioned, I'm going to ask you a few questions throughout the, let's say, the life cycle of a clinical trial. Now, where do you usually start? Is where the vendor would come into the equation. So during the RFP or maybe the vendor selection process. I'm interested to know how you typically initiate a relationship with a sponsor, and then really, like, if you take it one step further, if you were to collaborate there, how do you really bring that value? How do you ensure the experience for the sponsor is even increased?
Yeah. Well, I think we need to make a differentiation between new prospects, new clients, and existing clients. You were talking about initial relationship building. So that starts typically with reaching out to people at conferences or something like that, have discovery meetings with them, talk about our products, talk about us as vendors. For me, I can only speak for Suvoda, how we do that. And if we have done the relationship built for that specific trial, it's of course started with an RFP. So we receive request for proposal. In that procedure, we already consider when we review the protocol, is this something where we need to recommend the sponsor on specific functionality, on specific challenges they might have in their trial, leading to risks. So we like to already look into risk mitigation. And if we know that that specific sponsor or CRO is already working with Insight or Clinigen, and we are allowed to reach out to each other, we already contact each other at a very early stage to really look into how can we help the customer best? How can we make this trial most successful in a joint venture? Because it's always different parties need to work with each other, and we all can celebrate the success of a trial when we do it right from the beginning.
Yeah, on the Insight side, we are a company that does increase clinical supply chain efficiency. We're therefore not a must-have in a clinical trial like a CRO, an IRT, or a CMO, meaning that typical trial-specific RFPs don't really get to us directly, right? So for us to initiate a relationship with a customer, either they must be having a very big problem in a clinical trial that they need our support and our services for, or they're looking for software. But also in this collaboration, as Henk mentioned, we are able to participate in RFPs that Clinigen or Suvoda received for trial-specific needs and actually bring our expertise into that discussion as well.
Yeah, so indeed, just with new customers, it's different. We are very happy just to have and to receive RFP because this is an opportunity just to collaborate with the sponsor. But honestly, I don't like RFP because it's painful, take times, always the same question, but never asked the same way. And somewhere I think there is a lack of discussion and communication with the sponsor. Generally, just we have to do with the information you have. You have a limited time, or maybe if you have a chance, the sponsor organize a question session, or you can send question by email. You will be answered by email. And I think in our business, just there is so many ways just to set up solutions, so many ways to understand needs and to impact on the supply. I think discussion is very important, but fair enough, we have to start somewhere. So generally, yeah, I'd like to change, the figures received by the sponsor using Insight, just to make sure, do you think it is smart, is not too much or not enough, etc. As we have integration with Suvoda, just I do like to ask the question, did you already choose IRT companies? Yeah, and so I can say with which company just we have integration. So then it's different than when we have customers, generally if we deliver, customers stay with us. So we can then discuss much more. One important point is to be contacted and involved as soon as possible, even when the protocol is not yet written and certainly not finalized, and we can have an impact on it. Supply, of course, has a strong impact could have a strong impact on the study design.
Yeah,
It's a very interesting point about the RFPs, and somehow turning the tables a little bit on the RFPs. They're typically one way. We get a request, we need to provide a proposal. And here what we do together is turning a little bit the tables in the sense that we become advisors to sponsors during the vendor selection. So it's happened multiple times actually that the numbers that are provided on how much drug needs to be manufactured, sourced, packaged, labeled, distributed, comes into Clinigen, and actually we optimize that trial while the proposal is being built and build a second proposal with the optimized numbers. And interestingly, the average reduction on drug needs is about 40% in our experience. But there have been a couple of episodes where the amount of drug needed to be increased because the planned amounts were not enough to actually safely conduct the clinical trial. So it's not only about advising the sponsor to find ways to reduce costs and reduce drug waste, which is always awesome, but also having ways to understand in advance if any risks might appear at any time in the coming years for that specific clinical trial. And to do that, it's not something that one vendor can do alone. It's very important that there's a collaboration because each of us have their own responsibilities, their own focus, their own expertise that we need to be able to leverage in the best possible way.
And for us, working with inside the Clinigen, where we talk about trial design, it's really important to also look into how can we maybe discuss protocol design, study design, in making less waste, better carbon footprint, and so on. But that's also depending on what the customer's needs are on the IoT. Right? Which functionality is really required, which functionality is not absolutely required, but sometimes customers have a certain idea about what solutions they need, but as experts, we can, you already mentioned it, advisory, the advisory board for that customer to really talk about, hey, if you maybe adjust the protocol a little bit in this way, that has a consequence for trial, for kit design, that has a consequence for the demand, and has a consequence for the IoT, the supply chain settings, the strategy of that. And that's something, if you start early enough talking with the customer, and this can be the CRO, but preferably also involve the sponsor themselves in those discussions, because they have the final say. For regulators, they are the end responsible party. So involve them in an early stage to really look into how can we make this trial efficient.
There might even be a possibility to design the vendor selection process with them, because each trial is so different from one another. It's quite impressive. The requirements that will be required from the vendors on one trial is going to be completely different from another.
Yeah.
So maybe on one trial, there are certain IRT parameters that are absolutely necessary that some IRTs offer and others don't. Same for the supply chain. Does this trial actually need just-in-time or wet pooling? Are those strategies actually going to save money or cost more money? Being able at the beginning, during the decision-making process, to understand exactly and quantify, actually put a number on it, right? A dollar number on every decision allows the sponsor to make very educated decision. And once again, it is only when we have an aligned offering between all the vendors, where every little piece of the puzzle, fits perfectly with one another, that we can have the most efficient possible clinical supply chain.
And what is also crucial in the discussion at that moment of the RFP is consider the costs, not only the price. It's really something that is a differentiator. If you only look to price, you will have higher costs at the end of the trial. So I think that's also what at least some of the sponsors don't consider enough.
So if I recap this first initial section, basically that the sponsor would, or whoever would like to work with you, will select you based on certain capabilities, what you can offer for their specific trial. And then it's actually really important that you guys also get to communicate between each other already, because you can advise and influence each other to make it even better for the clinical supply chain and for the sponsor thus.
But that's rare. When we have a new customers, it's very infrequent that you have the opportunity before having been awarded or selected, then you have the kickoff meeting, that this is something we will discuss just afterwards. It's really rare that you have the occasion just to discuss with other vendors.
Yeah.
So that's somewhere, we have to start somewhere. So I understand RFP process, I understand this, but I think the sponsor has a lot to win, a lot to have as an added value, just to know, each other, and to know that the vendor, if they know that the vendor know each other, it could impact as well somewhere selection, because working together will streamline the process, will speed up the process as well. So we have to start somewhere, but I think RFP, we are missing discussion, and we are working as you can see on the slide here, we are working in silos. So there is not enough communication between vendor, especially if even the supply vendor can discuss, it's even better if the CRO can be in the loop as well. But but this is not easy, just at the RFP level, just to have this kind of discussion and information.
And what we already do in some kind of, well, in some discovery meetings, we even do joint demonstrations to really show this is what we as a partnership can benefit for you.
So the earlier you get together, the more value you could get out of it.
Yes.
Once you've been selected and the trial is coming to a start, so you will be starting to talk about trial design and setup, etc. How do you contribute to the value of the clinical trial before it even starts? And then when does a sponsor need to involve you? Like when do you, we already mentioned that there's value to be had before everything starts and during the selection process, but during the trial design, like when do you really start to add value? And how do you help each other again and contribute to each other's, let's say, advantages and bring that advantage to the sponsor?
Yeah, maybe I can start on this one. I'm just going to echo Stefan from earlier that the earlier we get involved, the better, because on the NSAT side, at least, if we get involved in the protocol draft or synopsis, there are so many decisions that have not been taken that will have a massive impact on the supply chain. And I'm talking decisions in the protocol design, in the design of the kit, and even in the manufacturing strategy, and being able to bring the supply chain perspective into those decisions to really understand how much it's going to increase waste or increase risks of having missed visits in the trial, can bring some perspective into the design of the trial itself and make it more supply chain friendly. It will make all of our jobs easier. It will make the sponsor's budget lower as well, and it will reduce risks of shortages and risks of patients not getting their drug in time, which is going to make clinical operations happy. So it's really a win-win-win situation if we get involved very, very early. And to answer your first question, how do we contribute? I mean, at NSAID specifically, we help by optimizing decisions. So we can quantify all of those decisions in the protocol, all of those decisions in manufacturing in terms of what impact they have on the supply chain, but also provide a supply chain strategy. How much do we need to source? How much do we need to package, label, manufacture, and provide the exact planning to Clinigen, for example, for them to implement. We can provide the optimal IRT configuration and the requirements from the IRT system that we can provide afterwards to Suvoda. Like I like to say, optimization is amazing, but it's theoretical until someone can make it happen, right? So without companies like Clinigen and Suvoda, everything we get out at NSAID is only theory, right? And they just make it happen.
And here I can say the devil is in the details. If you come with recommendations for the supply strategy, I really, from own experience when I was still at pharma, I know that the flexibility in the settings of the parameters is crucial. So the higher the level of detail in your supply settings is, the more benefit you have from the recommendations given by NSAID. That also requires that you need to be really flexible in your settings. Plan never comes out in life. So you need to have also those recommendations coming from NSAID. You need to already consider in advance when you start building your trial, what are the capabilities of, for example, the IRT. If you don't consider this enough, you might choose an IRT that is not flexible enough. So then your recommendations will fall on the table. And the initial expectations you had as a sponsor or as a CRO from the advantages from the efficient demand planning are not possible.
But I think one advice here, if we come up from an RFP, I think when we do the kickoff meeting, it's key because it's not too late, you know, and then it's the right moment just to put vendor together, especially everyone that is involved in the supply. So it's time to say, hey, by the way, we selected Suvoda, by the way, we selected NSAID as well, and Clinigen, so we know each other. Before the COVID, you know, it was very the use to have a physical kickoff meeting. I remember this big meeting room, you know, with all vendors, all stakeholders of the clinical trial discussing a full day together. It was even a nice moment because, just as often in Paris or whatever, and then we can have discussion and have drinks afterward in the hotel after the kickoff meeting. Since the COVID, I think this is something that disappears. And I think it's crucial for a sponsor because it's not late at the kickoff meeting, because by experience, based on the figures we receive for doing the quotation, when we do the kickoff meeting, there is always changes in the protocol, in the study, maybe new countries, etc. So I think it's not too late. But again, I think communication and discussion between vendor here is crucial. And then before doing your submission, a correct kickoff meeting and puts all stakeholders together. I think it's key just to have a nice setup.
Yeah, of course. It's important to have very clear roles and responsibilities. Even though we have very different businesses, there might be at some point some overlaps between vendors in terms of roles and responsibilities. It's happened in the past where one vendor thinks they're responsible for a certain activity and the other one thinks the same thing. That creates a little bit of a power strike at some point between the two companies. I think it's an important recommendation from the beginning for the sponsor to define very clearly the roles and responsibilities between the vendors. And as it was mentioned, as we know each other, not only do we know exactly what each of us is going to do in a specific project, but we also know the capabilities of the others, right? So if we're going to recommend a strategy for the supply chain, we're not going to recommend a strategy that is unfeasible by Clinigen, for example. If we're working with another company and we were not able to talk to them and to collaborate with them, we would have to do a lot of iterations in our work and rework it because maybe what we recommended is not feasible by the vendor.
Mm-hmm.
So the three of us are partners. We work with a lot of other vendors as well because that's how the business works, right? It is important that this level of collaboration can actually be expanded with the other companies too. We need to be able to exchange information, to exchange our constraints, to exchange our strengths, because it's going to allow us to do better together.
And I think also talking about the setup of the trial, not only talk about the possibilities, but also bring to the table the risks that you might expect as a sponsor, drug availability, maybe there are production issues, limitations. That's crucial to be aware of for us, that we allow the sponsor to be aware as a result of that for our limitations, that you can discuss those. I think that's not done enough. We always talk about how good we are. And but that's true. But also bring to the table, hey, I want to help you, but this is my limitation. How can we mitigate? How can we jointly fix this? And I think that makes the partnership powerful.
Yeah.
In short, because there have been a lot of elements that have been mentioned here, is that it's very important that you have a good communication between all stakeholders, so not just the vendors, but also the sponsors, etc. I wrote down that it's crucial to already start quantifying the impact of certain decisions, to try and anticipate certain risks, to know each other's strengths and weaknesses or how to mitigate those capabilities, and really have a good discussion or a kickoff session as well to agree on the protocol, on how is it going to look, and then how is it going to go until something changes. Because let's be honest, a clinical trial is amazing, but it never goes as it's planned. There's always something that changes. Doesn't need to per se get to the point where it's really risky business, but there's changes happening all the time. So imagine there is this wonderful trial that is ongoing, you three are working and collaborating on it, and something happens. So how do you really manage these constant changes in a trial as they arise? And where do you, if there's a potential risk, like manage these, for example, drug shortages, etc.? How do you?
I think the key word, of course, is flexibility. But I think the way to know each other is a strong advantage, because generally when something happens, the quickest the reaction is, the better it is. And so sometimes when we have, and if you work with a biotech, for the vendor management, for the project manager, just generally is playing the role of the bedbox. So the IRT is warning, hey, this, then is asking this to the sponsor. Sponsor go back to website, hey, guys, can you plan something? And then go back to Clinigen and say, hey, guys, can you ship something next week, and make a quick packaging labeling run. If there is something happen, the fact that the vendors can work together and know each other, just when a problem arises, we can discuss together and then show to the sponsor and already bring with a solution. Say, okay, there is something that could happen, but we have that solution. What do you think? We already discussed with Inside, we already discussed with Clinigen. So I think we need to be flexible, because without being flexible when something arises, and generally it has never been foreseen or forecasted. So you need to react quickly, but as well the advantage of working with vendors that knowing together, just make things quicker, we can find solutions quicker, we can see bottlenecks before, the sponsor can see it. So that's an added value, strong added value.
And a good basis for that is the real-time data that we can deliver. As
Yeah.
IRT. We know the enrollment, patients that are enrolled. We know from that what the demand for the ongoing patients are, and together with Inside, where we have an integration with, the real-time data can be analyzed by you with the batch specifics, expiry date, and so on. It again comes to collaboration, based on the real-time data, and then, of course, the moment Inside is coming with a recommendation to the sponsor, hey, maybe you need to adjust the supply strategy here and there, then it's easy for the sponsor to do it themselves. Not wait for somebody else that can do that for them, because that's a loss of time.
Yeah.
Because very often adjustments are risk mitigations. You should not lose unnecessary time to mitigate the risk, to solve the problem, to fix the problem. If you can do it yourself immediately, you're out. It's quick and it's easy.
Exactly, and the data that comes from your two companies actually flow in our system, as you mentioned, Hank. So to manage these constant changes in the trial, what we have is a monitoring application that compares real-time data to the forecast. So we get batch information, inventory information from Clinigen, we get the patient statuses and their current visits and so on, everything that we need from Suvoda, and we compare it to the initial plan, and we see as soon as there's a deviation, we get an alert. So we know if we need to adapt the supply chain strategy or if we're safe and doing okay. And if we do need to adapt the supply chain strategy, we're going to still use that data, run some machine learning on it to reforecast the future demand, recruitments, dropouts, and so on, and have a new supply chain plan. So as the graph that you're seeing right now shows, when there's an ongoing relationship, we are still collaborating. It's not only when the trial is being designed. When it's ongoing, we need data from the Suvoda system to run our algorithms, and we might update the IRT configuration when the trial's ongoing, because we're going to see that there's a need. Maybe a couple of sites are over-recruiting compared to the initial plans. We need to increase the buffers. Maybe we have a shortage in a depot and we need to change a little bit the IRT configuration. But definitely we're going to talk a lot with Clinigen, because we might need to change the timing of the next packaging run or the amount of drug that needs to be sourced in the next sourcing run, because optimization is not a thing you do one time when the trial is about to start. You have to continuously monitor and adapt your plan to real-time events if you want to keep something that is efficient for both the patient and the budgets.
What is facilitating the process as well is the way that we work together as well, is that our system has been already integrated. It must be obviously adapted and customized for each study, but the way that our system is integrated, just avoid human error, can speed up as well, just orders for distribution, get directly access to inventory reporting, for distribution reporting. So it helps as well just to streamline the process and to get information without potential human error. So I think integration is as well something that is very important when we work together.
And then key for the integration is, of course, the communication between operations and clinical trial supply. We all know the examples that we already spoke about this, plan and real life is deviating. From my own experience, I had several examples where suddenly the study manager called me as a CTS and said, well, compared to our plan, we thought the investigator would enroll a patient next week, only one. But all of a sudden, he found 5 patients. Nice. Friday afternoon, 5 o'clock. It's a disaster for CTS.
Yeah.
It's also a disaster for you, Clinigen, because you need to ship medication to that site in an expedited way. If you have the possibility to change the supply need yourself in the IRT on Friday afternoon, you don't need to wait for that. Then Clinigen receives that order the next second, and they can already process it. So that helps you to bring down the stress level at yourself. Let's start first with yourself. For Clinigen, but also you don't bring patient treatment at risk. And so that's also something, if you have an integration in place that works properly, where you can really rely on, it brings you peace of mind.
And then you asked a question earlier on how we manage this kind of risks and through the partnership, but there's one specific example, Stefan, that stays in my mind for all of these years now, is when you called me, I don't know, it was probably 2020, something like that.
2018.
2018, sounds like a long time ago. And you had this trial that was not going well on the supply chain side. Well, we didn't know the trial, we just jumped in. I think recruitment was 6 months in.
Yeah.
And we saw indeed, after doing some analysis and simulations, that we would, in the next 6 months, miss 400 patient visits. And well, that's extremely scary number.
For phase 3, yeah.
Yeah, for phase 3. So on that one, we were able to have an incredible collaboration, because saving a trial from itself is probably the most stressful thing that a clinical supply chain manager can ever go through. Seeing the number of 400 patients, I mean, you're already thinking we're going to shut down the trial, we're going to have to start it all over again. But we were able to find solutions that were not the big typical ones of halting recruitment right away or changing the IRT system, although it included changing the IRT system. We found probably about 100 different solutions, and we simulated them. We found which one had the biggest impact, and ended up providing a package of solutions that included bringing back some drug from Chile, changing the IRT configuration. It included trying to source drug from the market instead of the usual manufacturer, even changing the protocol. We changed the protocol while the trial was ongoing. And we even changed the schedule of treatment for the patients at some point to make sure that we could dispense more frequently to the patient and keep drug at the site. And in the end, not a single patient missed a visit.
No, but what changed as well is that we were just discussing with CRO, never with the biotech and the sponsor itself. Then it was an emergency and a rescue action, Then we start at that moment to discuss together with the sponsor, with the CRO, with the site, with the CTS, with the IRT. So definitely show that we can, by discussing and putting people together, I think we can, and it's strong system as well, of course, just we can save a study, of course.
Yeah, and again, this just illustrates the fact that what we do is just theory until it can be implemented, because everything we recommended had to be pushed operationally by Clinigen or an IRT system or even a CRO when we're talking about changing the protocol. If none of these partners were able to make that a reality, we would have lost the trial. The trial would have probably had a lot of problems. So it is amazing how much collaboration can bring in a clinical trial, even when things are at the worst that they can ever be.
Mm-hmm.
I think the only thing I can really deduce from this is that communication is so crucial, and you need to be a little bit flexible as well when risk appears, but also the key into try and anticipate where risk might appear and mitigate it as much as possible. Maybe to slowly go towards the end, if you were to look at the future, you've been collaborating for many years now, but what's next? How do you want to continue and further development and improve this collaboration to really help the sponsor and their clinical supply chain? What is there in an ideal world next?
Certainly more integration. Certainly, because we can go deeper in the integration of the
What
system.
detail?
Yeah.
I think, looking to our partnership, I would like to see that we are respected as a trusted advisory board. And that means that, as from the very beginning, sponsors should be open to connect people, connect stakeholders to each other, because all have the same goal: make this trial a success. And of course, looking to future, looking to what is happening all over the world, AI.
Yeah.
That's something where we really can make a use of, hope to make a use of, because currently the data pool is not big enough. There's a point of confidentiality. You cannot share any data with each other. But that's something we really should look into the future, that we can make better use of AI, that we have more reliable data that can help us.
And both of your points are actually going to bring more automation as well, less human interaction, less loss of time, less missed information as well, because actually human error is mostly missing information. I think there's a lot of opportunities in that direction. And to come back to the point that Stefanie mentioned multiple times, that very often the logistics provider, the supply chain provider, the IRT and planning are managed by the CRO, especially when working with smaller biotechs. We are hired by the CRO to support the clinical supply chain and have little contact with the sponsor and little contact amongst the vendors. I mean, in our cases, we know each other, so we do have that contact. I think this kind of way of managing clinical trials is a trend. We've seen in the past years companies that went from fully outsourcing to a single vendor, coming back to actually having the best vendor in each area of expertise, and then 5 years later going back again to fully outsourcing. There's trends in the industry. Things are moving all the time. But whatever the decision that is made by the sponsor, never forget that you've got experts in their fields that are right there and that you're paying to do a job. And sometimes making them and letting them do their jobs even better only costs you an hour of time of just having a discussion, of just, like Hank put it, having this advisory board there to share their expertise and their recommendations. So I think that's something to look forward to into the future as well, strengthening this kind of collaboration as well.
Exciting times ahead, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
If I can summarize a little bit what we discussed so far, or what we've discussed until, let's say, the future of partnerships between vendors, I think there's a few topics that really were very recurring. Is that the earlier you can jump into the collaboration with the sponsor and start discussing the trial, the better. The more value they will get out of it, the more advice and suggestions you can give, and the better the clinical supply chain might go throughout the duration of the trial. Now, even if you get in very early, that's wonderful, but I think in every topic we've discussed, the topics of flexibility and communication, really, they just came back. You need to have good communication between you all, you need to have good communication, also collaboration with the sponsor, and really be able to be flexible. Whatever, if there's a change or a risk or anything whatsoever that you need to be able to adjust and mitigate. Anything I forgot to summarize so far?
I think with this flexibility, the combination of knowing each other's capabilities and limitations.
Yeah.
That's also something you need to be aware of. And that's what the partnership brings.
Mm-hmm.
And thinking a little bit out of the box, it's not frequent in our industry to have clinical supply chain influencing the protocol design. It's not very frequent for clinical supply chain to be involved in a lot of decisions, actually. So thinking a little bit out of the box can help a lot too. It can bring a lot of value for the clinical trial itself and be even stronger in a good collaboration.
All right. Thank you for sharing your experience and the challenges you faced so far. I've seen that we have a few questions coming throughout the presentation. We still have 15 minutes left. If that's okay for you, I'll pick out a few.
We were efficient, huh?
Yeah.
Communication is key. I think it's because of the years of experience you have with each other. All right, so the first question that I saw appear here is, what is the most crucial factor in a successful collaboration that was highlighted in the webinar?
Shall I take that?
Yeah, okay, you go for it.
It's what I said just a few minutes ago. It's, of course, the communication, but the cruciality is more in the capabilities and the limitations. Being familiar with each other, that you know each other, and that the assumptions you make from, hey, this will Insight help us, this will Clinigen help us, this will Suvoda help us. That openness, that familiarity of and knowing the capabilities of each other, that's for me, that's key. That's crucial. And of course, communication.
Yeah, I think that's the word that really came the most.
But I want to insist as well on the fact that the supply, is crucial. But supply is not the service that will make your study a success. It's more the molecule, it's the scientific part, etc. But if the supply doesn't work, it brings the failure of the study. So I think that's why it's very important. The setup is crucial, just and the capacity just to forecast and prevent some potential bottlenecks is crucial. So I think we are how to say, all matter. The supply is crucial because no supply, no body. If we don't deliver the medicine to the patient, just there is no study until the moment. Maybe the future is to have virtual medicines, but I would be surprised about that. So I think it's very important just to have this communication and to have a strong setup and try just to avoid any potential bottleneck in advance.
Right. The next question that I see here is, do you collaborate as well with other vendors? And what if the sponsor already has a network and one of you has to work with them?
Yeah, like we mentioned earlier, Insight has worked on 12,000 trials, Suvoda 1,500, Clinigen thousands, I guess. I can safely say that there's a small portion of those that were actually done together. So we are all vendors. We all work with a lot of different other vendors than just the three of us. It's our bread and butter. If we didn't, we would be in very big trouble. So yes, absolutely. We can definitely collaborate with a lot of vendors. We've had so many styles of collaboration, at least at Insight, some that work better than others. So it's interesting to see a little bit what are the things that work best. So yeah, absolutely no problem on that side.
Also from our side, we work with many.
Yeah, exactly. Just we have absolutely no exclusivity. We know sometimes, just when I see that the study is completely in the wrong way, just I know that I can go inside and say, please, Amaury, just save this study. But otherwise, just again, we have absolutely no exclusivity. But the message behind, the communication flexibility is still valid, even if we start to work with the new companies. Generally, just if it works, the second phase will be with the same vendor. So the fact to always keep in mind to start formal and informal relation with all the vendors, whatever it is, Suvoda or Insight, it's valid.
Cool. What software do you use for clinical supply chain, and what function do they have? So it's a very broad question, and maybe you can all fill it in your own.
We have our own software for forecasting optimization simulation. So I think I'm not going to spend too much time.
No, it's the same. We do own Clinigen as its own ERP system. So the advantage is that we do own the code, so we can integrate with other systems easily. It's not on-the-shelf system. So that's an advantage as well. So this is on
Applies to us as well. We have our own built modules, our own
Or maybe that's exactly the strength, that you focus on your own strength and
Yeah.
expertise, and then bring the expertise of the other vendors and their systems to really bring the full added value to the sponsor.
And then it's a matter of integration.
Yeah, it's an interesting point, actually. The fact that we make each other grow in the right direction, or there's a very good example between Suvoda and Enside, where one of our common customers needed a very specific feature that we had shown would be saving a lot of money into the clinical supply chain, and Suvoda just made it happen, and it became one of your standard offerings now, right?
Again, being flexible and adjust.
Listen to
I
the
feel like this
customer.
is a repetition.
Yeah. It's a boring conversation.
Maybe another question here. When engaging in a joint collaboration, so that multiple of you, for example, is working for the same sponsor, is it necessary to establish 3 separate contracts, or can a single contract cover all the parties involved?
Probably true, no. No, in fact, again, there is no exclusivity, so sometimes it helps. Certainly, when we start to introduce our partner, I have many cases like this with Enside, just I introduce Enside to a customer because I consider that it's a big study and the optimization could bring a lot to the sponsor. So they can contract directly with Enside, or just for the sake of time, or to avoid, to develop a new contract because the study needs to start within the next 2 months. We can subcontract, as well with Suvoda, we have agreements just to subcontract to each other, or there is absolutely no problem to directly contract, even if we introduce them. So we trust each other, and we are not competitors. So yeah, there is all possibility.
So it's purely the preference of the sponsor.
Exactly. So yes, there is a possibility to have one single contract with the 3 of us. Inside, we have agreements with Suvoda and Clinigen to allow them to sell what we do. So yeah, absolutely.
Maybe one last question, unless there's any, I spoke too soon. More questions coming in. How does collaboration with the clinical world compare to other industries that use a supply chain? Have there been any lessons learned from outside the clinical space that you bring here? Interesting question.
Yeah, the commercial world and clinical world are extremely different. If you go on LinkedIn, for example, you're going to see a lot of jokes about supply chain, and supply chain being always super stressed, super involved last minute in every project, having to manage hurdles all the time, never sleeping, and that's always commercial supply chain. Now, for me, clinical supply chain is 10 times that. Unfortunately, I have studied commercial supply chain, so what I can say is I had to forget almost everything to learn clinical supply chain, because almost everything is new in clinical supply chain due to the fact that no deterministic model is going to work in such an uncertain world as clinical trials. So there is likely a lot of learnings that we can have from commercial supply chain into clinical supply, but one big learning to remember is that typical technology and typical methods that work in commercial are very often not going to work in clinical supply chain. That's one of my big takes for this one.
And for me, it's really, in commercial, you need to be less flexible.
Yeah.
You manufacture a batch, you distribute to pharmacies, and there's patients that get prescription. In clinical supply, you really have to keep in mind the distribution to the patients in their trial, considering, for example, shelf life. You have short shelf life, you need to manufacture more often, and you need to distribute to certain patients in certain regions, in certain geographies. So sometimes you need to really import few kits. That's completely different from commercial. So you need to be more flexible, more adjustable, more stress, how do you say that? Stress stable.
Resistant.
Yeah, resistant, because in clinical trials, real life and planning always deviate. You know that in advance.
Yes, I think it does make a difference. In commercial, you can have a strong planning and fix to it, and this is like this, and you can plan for months, and then you go for the year. And with the batch, with the production batch, the storage, the distribution, which is clinical trials, just we have always unforeseen events that happens. And quantity may vary, just each time we do a quote, we do an average, but we know that in reality, just we will ship much more to Spain and much less to France, or, just we double the number of shipments or whatever. So I think that this is, funny clinical trials because we never know exactly where we go. We try to know, but that's for me the main difference.
Yeah, actually, there's one thing that came to my mind now that we can learn from commercial supply chain is that as commercial supply chain is so big, in pharmaceutical it represents maybe 95 to 99% of the supply chain. It's so big and it represents so much money that there's a lot more focus on trying to reduce costs and being efficient and lean and optimization. Actually, mathematical optimization tools were used for the first time in oil and gas, and then right after oil and gas, it was used in supply chain because in commercial supply chain, you optimize network design, you optimize where you're going to build your next manufacturing site, you optimize all of your inventory on all of your depots. And something we don't do in clinical supply chain, at least not frequently and not systematically. So at NSAID, we've been trying to advocate for this for 23 years now, to bring optimization models to the clinical supply chain, because a trial supply chain, yes, it can be worth from anywhere from 200,000 euros to sometimes 300 million. I think the biggest one I've seen was $500 million just for the supply chain due to very expensive comparators. So waste is 70% in our industry. We can learn from commercial supply chain in the way that we manage our waste, in the way that we manage efficiency in clinical supply. That is something that can definitely be done.
All right. I propose we round up here. I think an hour for the topics that we've touched upon is way too short to deep dive into every little piece. So for the audience, thank you for taking the time to listen to this discussion and this panel talk. Thank you to our speakers, Anne-Marie, Henk, Stefan as well. If you have any more questions related to the topics today or for our panelists, feel free to reach out directly to these gentlemen. Their email is on the screen. I'm pretty sure they would be excited to go further into a certain topic with you than during this, let's say, initial discussion here today. Gentlemen, thank you very much. Thank you to the attendees, and I wish you a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening.
Bye-bye.